Hello, and welcome to episode number 12 of Boutique Talk. My name is Jake Boston, otherwise known as Steelbook Obsessed on all your major social media platforms. And if you want to listen to all things physical media related, then you've come to the right place. Every week I have on a new guest. And today, my guest is an artist who has made some amazing art for properties I love and has created one of the most beautiful steelbooks that I have in my collection. It's such a privilege to have on Z Shu on the podcast. Z, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm doing great tonight, and I really like the intro that you had set up. It feels very cinematic, and I was like, "Ooh, I'm getting like introduced with all of that." But yeah.
Well, yeah, I personally I have a couple of physical media items that you've made, but I went on your website and just saw all of the amazing art that you throw on there, like a lot of properties that I absolutely love. I saw some. I think the first one you did was Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm like, oh, you do video game stuff too. That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm actually trying to do more video game licensed
Hmm.
like properties like that. Because I started out mostly doing things for movies.
Hmm.
But I think I more than movies or like watching movies, I probably play more video games.
Gotcha.
And so I'm actually like making more of a foray into that field, which is, it's like very similar. It's all entertainment. So yeah.
Right. I do you think since you've worked with kind of both industries, is there one that you kind of prefer over the other, or they all kind of do the same thing?
Well, I think because so like the thing with movies and video games, well, I think more than anything, I'm in like more like the advertising industry or like illustration industry as a whole.
Yeah.
I think with movies and video games, the clients that I work with, like the process is very much the same. You know, it's not like I'm a concept artist for a video game or I'm like directly working on artwork for the movie, but because
Hmm.
it's more like I work on like advertising or like poster art for those things. And so, yeah, I think like both are relatively like equal, in my experience. I have worked as like more as like a concept like visual development artist for games though, and that's very fun as well. But like with those, you don't really see your work out in public just because it's like the thing you do behind the scene. Um, so, but I don't do a lot of that right now.
Sure. Um, how since we kind of are talking about the business side of things, how did you get started doing this? I feel like it's such a hard thing to kind of get into.
Yeah, I think, with posters and especially like artwork for steel books and all of that, I think it's a very like niche industry. So
Right.
I started, so I've been drawing ever since I was very, very little.
Mhm.
And I, had the privilege of going to art school, which I did in Baltimore and graduated in 2018. And it was in there that I kind of like realized I wanted to do something with movies,
Mhm.
um, and not necessarily go into something like directing or producing or something, but I knew I wanted to head into a field. I wanted to head into a field as an illustrator. I wanted to make like my love of movies have something to do with that.
Right.
And around that time, I had discovered it was like the very small but like budding alternative movie poster scene
Like the
around that
Mondo
time.
of it all. Yeah.
Yeah, so like
Mhm.
the places like Mondo and galleries like that would pop up and artists and like illustrators would do alternative posters for their
Yeah.
favorite films. And so I really, really liked that scene. And so I was kind of like, okay, I wanted to figure out how to get in. But the thing is, it was very small. And so my kind of way was I just like saw what all of my favorite artists at the time were doing. And so
Mhm.
I kind of did what they did. And I developed this like portfolio of movie poster work. And right out of college, I began landing freelance work just because I had like a small social media following at the time. But I began looking for, I like kind of started pitching my work to a lot of like the galleries out there, like places like Mondo, who did a lot of those like licensed properties,
Mhm.
and also like pop art galleries. And I tried to really kind of like find where I can like participate more in that sort of community. And so, on Facebook, there's a lot of people who do like those private commissions with, they make those like poster groups where they would commission artists to do a print for their favorite movie. So I started out by doing, private commissions for them, and just kind of trying to like see where everyone in that area was hanging out. But I think I eventually, it was like through a lot of just like marketing myself in that area that eventually I was able to find a mentor who, guided me through a lot of this, like the process of working for, as like a freelance illustrator and designer. And after that, I got my first agent in the business. So like an art agency that, you know, and I'm like on their roster. So they basically like promote my work and get me a lot of work for
Hmm.
clients in the entertainment industry. Um, but it was soon after that that I started getting, like clients started reaching out to me directly, and they were kind of like, hey, like we saw that you had a portfolio full of movie poster art, and also just like, something else I did was I made mock-ups of movies that I really wanted to do steelbooks and Blu-rays for.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
so
Huh.
yeah, and so they saw that I already had these like fake mock-ups, right? Like
Hmm.
I did a lot of like fake Criterion covers, and think now I've taken them all down because I'm like, I probably shouldn't put the Criterion logo
Sure.
on like a fake
Hmm.
cover. I was like, no. Um, but I think I was able to like get my start with Blu-ray and steelbooks, because of that, because like I did a lot of those mock-ups, and yeah.
So do you it's nice to see that you actually like had Criterion in mind when you were starting things out. Do you collect physical media on your end, or do you just kind of like watch movies here or there, used to rent them, or yeah, how did that process go for you?
Yeah, so I don't collect physical media. I do watch, well, I used to watch a lot of movies. I tend to go through these phases where, sometimes I would go through like a movie binge where I would just watch nothing but movies.
Hmm.
Other times I would just, go on a gaming binge where I would do nothing but play games for a while. It really depends, but because I think I mainly like fell in love with movies first, so I would watch a lot of them, and this was before like the Criterion Channel was a thing.
Right.
But I remember watching a lot of like classic films, and a lot of movies like that on like Canopy, and you know just like renting them out through my school library and all of
Hmm.
that. Yeah.
Well, a lot of the work that you've done in your physical media, your boutique work, is of classic films, of films that haven't really gotten enough love, and the art that you're putting forward to that is definitely like shining a new spotlight on them. So that's kind of cool to see that you love that genre, so you're making work for that genre. Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And boutiques are kind of good at doing that anyway. They're good at being like, hey, you might have overlooked this movie before, but we're gonna put it in a nice box set, and you'll have a nice new like hidden treasure of a movie. It's always nice to find a hidden gem whenever you're out there like trying to watch movies and finding something new.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think I the thing is I didn't grow up on a lot of movies,
Hmm.
but I first began like really delving into the world of film around like 2014, 2015. So this was like after I began college, and I I it was funny. I did it because I didn't bring like my PS4 to
Hmm.
school at the time, and so like I was out, like I needed another thing to like fill my free time with, and so I started watching a lot of movies, and I realized I really liked a lot of classic film. And I felt like kind of embarrassed about that for a bit, because it was like not a lot, it's like kind of like an old people thing, like not a lot of people, or I didn't really find another like other like classic film lovers, um or at least around like the circles that I was hanging around with
It's
at the
definitely
time.
niche, that's for sure. But it's also nice. It's definitely not like the superhero, mass,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah,
And
it's very
in
cool,
my
especially in
opinion, it's
college.
better.
No, I agree. I love a good classic film. I love them both, but yeah, it's a lot harder to find a fan of classic film than it is to find like of just a horror genre or action genre or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I think also like classic film just like it taught me a lot about things like values and like compositions. Because it's just like once you kind of like distill everything down to like the very basics, like studying a lot of the all-time great films from like, in the 40s and 50s, I was like, okay, I understand now why everybody likes Alfred Hitchcock or like why
Right.
everyone likes Kurosawa.
Hmm.
It's just like they made everything like everything you need to make a good movie with is like just in that movie. And
Right.
it's like not filled with a lot of like extra, visual effects or, anything like that. And nothing wrong with that, of course, but yeah.
Well, speaking of Kurosawa, you actually were able to work on one of his movies, which had to have been like a feather in your cap. I would have been,
It
to
was,
me, that
yeah.
seems like one of like the greatest honors. So I'll show this off if you would want to talk about like how your process went with one of my favorite steel books in my collection. I don't think this one gets enough love, and it's so gorgeous. So I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger, and if you just want to talk about it while I show it over, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, sure. Yes, so this was back in trying to remember the year. I think it was 2021 where Lionsgate had reached out to me to do it was the Best Buy Steelbook exclusive art for Kurosawa's run.
Hmm.
And first of all, getting that email, it was because I had never worked with them before. And I
Yeah.
think they reached out to me because they had worked with a few of my like my art buddies, and they probably recommended me to them, and that's how. And they saw that maybe my art was like along the same lines of what they were looking for. But it was so funny because I love Kurosawa movies, and I've done a few artwork for Kurosawa. I did a poster for Seven Samurai that I still have on my portfolio website,
Hmm.
and it was kind of like one of my biggest dreams at the moment to do a cover for Kurosawa one day. And so, but the thing is that with I think with posters and with steelbooks, to actually get a job for a classic film like that is not, it's kind of rare, like Criterion and, places like that, they do it, but most steelbooks are for like modern movies.
Right.
And so I was kind of like, okay, well, I really want to do this someday, but it's, it probably will never happen. So when they did reach out to me to do it, I was like so happy and thrilled to do it. And yeah, and I've worked with them since, also on a steelbook for John Wick 4, and
Mhm. I'll show the
they're
one off later. It's another great one. Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Mhm.
And the client, Lionsgate, they are all amazing. Just great, very chill people to work with. I think usually my favorite clients are the ones that kind of just like let me do whatever,
Mhm.
and they kind of just like nudge me in the right direction. But I think, in this business, sometimes you have a client where they're like super micromanaging everything you do, which is kind of a drag. But with Lionsgate, they were kind of just like, yeah, like whatever you make, they were just like, we're all good.
And I
We
honestly
trust
think
that,
that's why I think that's why a lot of the collectors really like Lionsgate right now. They come out with the best steel books, in my opinion, that are being made, and it's because the artwork definitely pops on every single release. Like they make unique things, and I think that does kind of uh it kind of lays a lot of importance on the artist's shoulders. It lets them kind of go wild and say, "Hey, do you like this movie, number one, and B, we like your
Mhm.
artwork, can you make something for this?" I love, it's like a peanut butter and chocolate combination. It's going to come out with something amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I also think that's definitely the reason why they've been doing amazing like steel books. And yeah, they're just I think they're very trusting of the process of like the art
Mhm.
making process, and they're kind of like, we actually, when they did reach out to me with Ron, they already had like a vision of where they kind of wanted to go with the steel
Okay.
book, and they were kind of like, we were thinking, that it would be the head of the king in Ron, and then they would kind of be like a burning house, and if you could kind of just do something with that. And so like they have like their guidelines and suggestions of where they want, but I also like felt very it was just like a very pleasant experience working with them.
Hmm.
And I think like everyone I know who has worked with Lionsgate, they also feel the same way.
That's
And
all
so
I've heard too, and it's great to hear.
yeah.
I love how they're making such great work, and everybody that's worked with them has had a positive experience. It's rare when that happens in
Hmm.
the entertainment industry, and it makes me happy that it's happening here. Did you watch Ron a lot growing up, or did you watch it in college when you went down your Kurosawa kick, or how that happen?
Right. So yeah, I hadn't watched Ron at all until I got the job for it,
Hmm.
actually. So I had watched a bunch of Kurosawa movies back in college,
Hmm.
and and again, growing up, I think it's just like also just growing up in a immigrant family. My parents didn't really know a lot of American culture, and so I was kind of like very clueless on that end. And so I kind of like went through a self-directed crash course in college where I just, watched a lot. I like made a list of movies to watch and then I just watched them all.
Hmm.
And a bunch of Kurosawa movies were on that. And so, but I didn't watch Ron until I got the job for it. And it was so funny because like on the call, it was like me and the Lionsgate people, we had a call to discuss like what we were going to do for the art. And
Hmm.
then I hadn't even watched the movie, but I remember just being like, "Oh my gosh, I love this movie so much." So I
Right,
was
right.
like,
Hmm.
kind of I was like, "Oh, what if they like
I
see that
can't
I
say I haven't
haven't
seen
watched
it.
the movie?" Yeah,
Right.
and so I was just like, "I love this movie so much. I'm gonna have to rewatch it before I do anything for it." So, yeah, but it's great. I love that movie.
Yeah, I honestly, I've had it in my collection for a couple of years now. I hadn't personally watched it, so I knew I was going to talk about it. I have it on right now. I've watched it before we went live for like an hour and a half.
Ooh, uh-huh.
Number one, the 4K looks amazing. It is so
Yeah.
dang sharp, but the movie itself is just so cinematically done. I guess you can say Kurosawa has always been a master at that. I want to say this was his final film, if I'm not mistaken, and he just kind of.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's a very like it's a very like closed movie. Like it's telling just a story of like a man and his sons and the relationship that they're having, but it's also expands into these epic war scenes at times. It's a great flick, and yeah, I'm very happy I've had a reason to finally watch it now.
Yeah, it's such an incredible movie. I think like I actually learned after I saw the movie that it was his retelling of Shakespeare's King Lear. Because I hadn't
Oh, hmm.
ever read King Lear, and like I
Hmm.
know of it, but I didn't realize that it's basically like the same story, but the
Sure.
Japanese like. And but yeah, now I kind of like want to rewatch it because I also have like my my copy of the Steelbook
Hmm.
around. So
Right. No, and I think you will be blown away by the picture. It looks phenomenal. And yeah, I've never been a big Shakespeare guy either, but it's crazy like how many
mhm.
works of art, just modern day stuff, is just a retelling of what he made hundreds of years ago.
Yeah. Mhm.
Hmm. Well, we have a couple questions thrown in here. I'm gonna kind of show them off here. I don't know if you use Letterboxd. It's an app where you like
Oh,
rate movies and stuff.
yes, I do. Okay, that was so funny. Right before this podcast, I was thinking of like what questions like you might ask, or if
Hmm.
there was like anyone who might ask questions, and I was like, oh my gosh, I should check my letterbox because I realized totally forgot like my four favorite movies that I
Right.
had like had on my list. So I actually was just on letterbox.
Well, look at that.
Um, yeah, and so my four. Okay, I think my 4 favorite movies, one number 1 is probably Blade Runner.
Okay.
I have, like, a wealth of knowledge about, like, everything Blade Runner related. I'm a huge sci-fi geek. I
Hmm.
love reading, watching, playing anything sci-fi, and I think
Sure.
that movie is kind of, like, the pinnacle of it all, just, like especially, like, the art direction and visual, like, aesthetics of it
The
is
world
so
feels,
good.
yeah, it feels lived in for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and so, that's probably number 1. So currently, I feel like the other 3, it's, like, always changing for me. because like sometimes I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is like now my favorite movie of all time. Like a while back, like I was like, I watched Children of Men for the first time. I was like, okay,
Oh,
this is now one of my favorites of all time.
it's
But
great.
now I'm just
Yes.
like, oh, maybe it's gonna change. So like right now on my letterbox, actually my four movie is I can like pull it up right here. It's Blade Runner, My Own Private Idaho,
Okay.
Infernal Affairs, the
Haven't
Hong
seen that
Kong
one.
movie, and
Yeah.
also there's Magnetic Rose, and so that
Mm-hmm.
one is like an anime. It's like a short anime film
Mm-hmm.
directed by Satoshi Kon and I think the dude who made Akira. But they work together on like a series of animated films, and Magnetic Rose is like a is one of them, and it's like a sci-fi story, and it takes place inside this like derelict spaceship that's also like an opera house. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's for sure also one of my favorites. But I think they're always changing
Right.
slightly.
Yeah, mine on Letterbox. I have like a staple, like my favorite movie of all time, and then I usually just have Toy Story on there because I love Toy Story so much. But then
Oh,
there's a
really?
couple of
Yeah.
floaters all the time. Yeah, I think right now I have The Social Network because I think that is just like so great, like one of the better movies that's been made in the past 20 years. And
Yeah.
there's
Mhm.
a documentary that came out like 5 years ago called OJ Made in America. It's like 10 hours long, just tells the story of the man and from his like sports days to what happened to him later on in life. And it's so
Oh,
fascinating. Yeah.
oh
It,
yeah. Okay. I have to watch that then because I also watch I like listen to a lot of true crime when I'm working.
mhm.
And so yeah, what is it called again? OJ Made America?
OJ Made in America. Yeah.
Made in America. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. I want to say it's on Disney Plus, I think. It was made by ESPN Films. So there's like
Oh, okay.
it's split into 5 2-hour chunks. The first chunk is about like his football career, and then the next
Hmm.
4 chunks are just about like his life after that. And it's so fascinating. Like if you don't want to watch football stuff, you don't have to. If you just want to get
Hmm.
to what happened in the 90s, you can. It's yeah. I recommend all of it. I think all of it is captivating.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, like I mean, I think like I'm very familiar with the case, but I'm always, on the lookout for like true crime documentaries and all of that. Um, but yeah, that's awesome. Have you seen like the new Toy Story? Was that Toy Story 4
Man, that came out a
or was that
while
Buzz
ago too.
Lightyear?
Yeah. What
Okay, yeah.
wasn't the biggest fan of that one. Whenever,
Okay.
I have a very weird side tangent pet peeve. Whenever things that aren't supposed to drive cars, I don't like it. I don't know why that
Aw.
is. It just pulls me out of the experience. I'm like, this would never happen. They'd get in a wreck. They would just be done. And I don't know why. It's so bizarre, but I'm like, nope, I'm just pulled out now. And that one has one of those at the very end. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only seen, 1 through 3, but I remember, like, crying at the end of 3, and then when I heard
Yeah.
they were making a 4th one, I was like, "Wait, like,
Yeah.
didn't
No.
it already end?" Or yeah, so
Definitely stop at 3. The first 3 are amazing, and the 4th one just kinda drops the ball a little bit. It's still a fine animated movie, but definitely not on par with the first 3, for sure. Let's see here. We had Spicy 4K Action say, that they also have the
Oh,
Rand
thank
Steelbook,
you.
which is nice, yeah. And, Lionsgate has the best steelbooks, the artwork, and the cost. Absolutely agree.
Yes.
Speaking of Lionsgate, I'm gonna kind of side tangent on to your second steelbook that you made with them, which is a movie that
Mhm.
came out this year. One of my favorites of the year, John Wick Chapter 4.
Woo!
How did
Yes,
you
it's
get this gig? That's amazing. Like, it's
yeah.
there had to have been so many people fighting to make artwork for this steelbook.
So it was like the craziest story. And it's I think it's like my favorite art story I've been
Oh,
telling like this
I
year
can't
so
wait.
far.
Mhm.
So I worked with Lionsgate on Ron, and I remember like everybody really liked it, and they were like, they. So here's the thing: I never search up my own name or like my own steelbooks online because I remember they actually told me Lionsgate was like, "Oh, Z, did you know like so people have like started posting your Ron Steele book on like there's like Blu-ray forums or like there's like a variety of them." And I was like, "Oh, that's so scary. Like I don't want to see like what people are saying." But so that went really well, and then I think it's actually it was like last November they reached out to me for, or maybe it was last summer. It was last year they reached out to me for John Wick 4.
Hmm.
And I was actually a huge John Wick fan already. Like it's pretty much the only action series that I've like the only modern action series I've watched like like in the modern age, like forever. And I remember a while back I heard that they, with every John Wick movie, they did like an artist series. So they would get a group of artists to do like promotional artwork and marketing artwork, posters for the upcoming movie. I
Sure.
remember seeing the artwork that was done for I think like John Wick 2 and 3, and I was like, oh man, that's like so cool. Like what a dream job.
Hmm.
And so when they reached out to me for John Wick 4, I was like, whoa. So it was very exciting. And it was also, I think, just like it was a very long process because there was like a lot of a lot of rounds of sketches and, changes that I had to go through.
Hmm.
The piece that you saw, it was actually, because I had my original plan, I did like a much more complex
Oh.
piece, or like I had a lot of really complex like artwork in mind for the
Hmm.
series. And so I really wanted to do this piece that was, it would be John Wick. And you know how in the fourth one, he like goes to Japan
Yeah.
and he like, there's like just so many great scenes where they're fighting in like the Osaka castle, and there's just like great like Japanese screen art in the background. I had
Yep.
this idea that it would be like all the enemies of like John Wick, but illustrated in like an ancient like Japanese calligraphy style. And it
Mm.
would be like John Wick, but like illustrated the way I would draw him. And but he would be in front of the screen, which would depict like all of the calligraphy art on the background. And like I
That's
had it
cool.
in my mind, I was like, listen, I know, I was like trying to plead with them. I was like, I really want to do this idea. But the thing is that they really wanted me to do something way simpler.
Hmm.
And I think the reason for that is because with the whole artist series, like
Hmm.
everyone's pretty much just drawing a profile of John Wick. And
Hmm.
so it was kind of like if they had a picture, if they had a poster that was like a lot more complex to read, like it wouldn't really fit with the rest of the artwork. And so I ended up having to kind of like be like, okay, like I'll just do this really quick drawing of John Wick. And I remember that they really liked it. And so they were like, can you just clean this up and, we'll just
Hmm.
like call this done.
Not easy.
And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, sure. But yeah, and I remember it took me like a lot of tries. So they got me like a lot of references of Keanu Reeves, because I think like we all just like really wanted to nail it, you
Hmm.
know? Because especially because mine was, it doesn't, except the red, it doesn't have any color. It's a very quick drawing of him. And so they were kind of like they were just like, we feel like you would do a really good job just making something super simple and just like you don't need to add like anything else. And I even tried adding text, and at the end they were just like, oh no, we're not even going to place text. We're just going to
Hmm.
put a little John Wick logo,
Hmm.
and that was it. But yeah, and so I was more than happy to do all of that. And I didn't hear back from them until several months later. Uh, and it was so funny because I got like an email from Al, one of the art directors, and he was like, hey, like, so did you know Keanu Reeves like flew down to, like, we hopped on a call, and he was just like, so the craziest thing happened. Keanu Reeves heard that Lionsgate was doing an art campaign for John Wick
Hmm.
4. And apparently he was like shocked that they didn't, like, no one like wanted to tell him at first. And but he ended up being like, hey, like I'd love to see all the art in person. And so he like flew out to Paris, where they had printed all of the artworks, and then he
That's
got to like
cool.
see all of the artworks in person, and he just like
Wow.
wanted to be there to like give his blessing. And so I was kind of like, that is so insane. Like you hear
Hmm.
so many stories of this guy being like such like a treasure online. But then like you actually experience it, and I was just like, oh wow, I feel like I'm blessed by Jesus or something. So
That's a
yeah, but that was very, it was like such a great, job to work on. And
right.
yeah.
Did you ever get feedback from him if he saw like all of the images? I'm assuming that didn't happen, but that'd be very cool if you heard his 2 cents on the piece that you drew of
I
him.
mean, all I heard was that the AD was like, yeah, like Keanu saw all the art, and he loved your piece, and he was, I think, he just gave his like stamp of approval
Hmm.
on everything. Because I think, so the thing also with working with posters and like steel books and all of that is, if you're drawing an actor,
Hmm.
usually you would have to get the approval like from their talent agency, so their agent or manager. I've done like a lot of work where sometimes like the manager is like, or the management team is like very picky on how they want the actor to look like. So like I, had one team tell me, oh, you have to like make this actress look thinner or like 10 years younger, or yeah, sometimes it can get kind of annoying like that.
Hmm.
And so um so I, just to kind of get like a stamp of approval from like the main star of this movie himself, and he took the time out of his life to just like go and see everything in person. I was just
Yeah.
like, oh wow, like that is, you did not have to do that, but that's like, so it's like such a nice thing to do. So
I love that he's just like, hey, I did not think that there was going to be this many images of me made by artists about this movie. I just want to see all of them, and yeah, I love that he doesn't have a lot of free time as is, so he
right,
probably made
right.
that as like a promotional stop. Just look at everything that's being promoted, looked at everything, loved it, signed off on it. Just yeah, very cool of him to do and like make an event out of it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, totally. Like, not, it's not, every day that, like, I had never heard of any actor or like any major actor doing something that nice, but
Yeah.
it's very good. I feel like it's very heartwarming to learn that there's just like some really good people in the business.
So you had to go through a few passes of Keanu Reeves. How about Donnie Yen on the backside? How that was it the same
Yeah.
process or?
Yes, that was the same process. I think, so it was, I did the John Wick art first, and then
Hmm.
afterwards they were kind of like, oh, like we really like how simple the art is. They were like, okay, we're gonna make it into the Best Buy steelbook.
Hmm.
And I think, yeah, so they had also printed it for, as like a promotional piece for Brazil Comic Con last
Hmm.
year.
Okay.
And then they were kind of like, okay, for the steel book, we really want to see if you can draw like Donnie Yen for the the back cover. And so it was similar in that we had to get like the approval of his team or like talent, management.
Hmm.
And I think they were also very like particular about how they wanted him to look like, because I think, because in the movie he like plays one of the antagonists, but he's like not really like the really evil bad guy. He just
Right.
like
Yeah.
has to try to kill
Hmm.
John Wick because he's forced to. So like I think um they made it a point to be like, you can't make it look like he's too much like the bad guy. And I think that's like a whole thing with him. It's like Donnie Yen has like a very specific image of how he wants to look like to like an American
Mm.
audience or like a
Hmm.
Western audience, and he doesn't want to appear to be like a villain. And so I remember going through like a couple of poses and like drawing iterations, and just like, it's like kind of tough because it's like, well, he is one of the bad guys, quote unquote, but
Hmm.
I think eventually we settled on that one. So that's the one that got approved.
Yeah. It all looks great, but now talked about it like 10 minutes ago. My brain's going back to like what that artwork would have looked like with all the calligraphy, with all the bad guys on there, with him just kind of like looking up at them. That seems like a very video game-ish like style pose, like looking at all the bosses you have to defeat.
Yeah, or it wasn't like Keanu Reeves looking up at them, but it was kind of like it would be in the background, if you know what I mean. But yeah, yeah, that's like what I was thinking along the same lines.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Did
but
you get
I'm like, hmm?
did you get far on that one, or they just kind
uh,
of
I
wanted
only
you to do
got
like
to like,
something simpler?
Right, I only did the sketch to that
Hmm.
one, and then they were kind of like, could you try something else? Because they were just like, it's just too complex, and we like the idea, but it's just like it just doesn't fit with the rest of the artwork. And they had mentioned they were just like someone on the team just like is asking if you could just do like a very quick like drawing of John Wick in like a very inky, you know, calligraphic like calligraphy style. And
Hmm.
I did that, and that was it was so funny. It took me like 2 seconds to do it, but that ended up being like the winner.
Right. So when there's two different ways that an artist can kind of do their work, a creative way and a professional way. I guess, what are the pros and cons to both?
Mm,
That's a
you
very
mean like,
wide, vague question, but like I know that creativity you can kind of let your brain go free, but professional, you're going to have some notes as to like what you need to do for this, this, and this. So I guess, do,
yeah.
is there a certain process you like better, or when you go into either line, is it kind of nice to have notes, or do you wish you wouldn't have some at some point? Just kind
Yeah,
of go into like the way you go about doing this, because I don't get a lot of like insight into like the creative industry thing, especially like
mhm.
making pieces like this. I've always been fascinated about how it works. I'm just trying to kind of see what your process is like when you're creating a piece like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the creative versus professional thing, it has to be in freelance art and, you know, in like commercial art, it has to always be like a mix of both. I
Hmm.
think the best jobs are where I kind of get like a really good mix of both, where like the client trusts me to kind of like do my own vision for what I had envisioned for this. And,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes they like point to or like give me really good feedback or help point me to different directions. But they're like, at least the way I prefer is that they're mostly hands off.
Hmm.
Um, so that's like my ideal situation, and that's also why, like, you know, some of my favorite jobs have been like the John Wick steelbook and, you know, the Ron steelbook, is because like the client was very, you know, gracious with all of that. I think sometimes I run into this problem where I do a lot of commercial work or like marketing work, advertising posters and stuff, where the client like tends to micromanage, and so all it's like kind of like 90% like professional, or like they're like always giving me feedback on, or and it's just like I feel like I don't have that control
Hmm.
over my own art. And at that point, you know, I've looked at all the jobs I've done where I felt that way, and they're like, even if the final art turns out like good, like I don't really feel really any attachment to it, because I'm kind of like, oh man, like I just basically did like everything they asked.
Hmm.
And I'm kind of like the executor of their will. You know, like I've executed everything they asked, but I felt like I had very, very little say or
Sure.
control as to
Hmm.
everything. And so that's kind of like the situations where like I'll live with it, but it's like not my favorite thing to do. Um, and then there's like situations where the client has like pretty much zero feedback. So it's like the complete opposite, where they were kind of like, we will
Right.
just pay you money to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And I find those very fun. But at the same time, I'm in those situations, I'm like also kind of worried, because I'm like, well, you are paying me money. So like
Hmm.
you have to have something, you know,
Right.
like
It's nice to just
you
like
have to
even
have,
throw like, hey, we're thinking of using this, or like you
right. Or
go in
just
this
like,
style. Yeah. Hmm.
right, or just like some tiny feedback, or just so I can be sure I'm going in the right direction with these kinds
Right.
of things. Yeah, I think that my least favorite situation to be in, though,
Hmm.
is when a client comes to me and they give me a list of artwork or artists that they want me to emulate
Oh,
instead of trusting my own style. And so
yeah.
like I've had like a few of those situations pop up over the years, where they were kind of like, okay, so we really like this artist. And we know your art style is like not really like that, but this artist couldn't do this job for whatever reason. And so we were kind of like wondering if you could make your art kind
That
of
would
like
irk me.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I've actually realized every single time, I've only done like maybe a few of those jobs.
mhm.
Every single time I've done a job like that, the client ends up not liking it because it's kind of like I don't really want to emulate someone else.
Yeah, and your
So
heart's not
I
in it.
always try.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
and I always try to be like, okay, well, I still want to stay true to myself. But
Yeah,
then it's just like not what the client is asking for. And so that's actually my least favorite situation to be in. It's like something that I've learned to watch out for. So now I'm kind of like, okay, if they're sending me a bunch of other people and it's like a style that I'm kind of like, why did you contact me for this? Like, there's a lot of illustrators out there. Yeah, I think it helps for them to know what they really want, is
sure.
what I'd say.
Yeah, no, I would hate to be like, "Hey, we like this art style by this artist. Can you be more like this?" That would
Right.
drive me nuts. Yeah.
Mhm.
I know that you've talked about doing artwork on physical media, and you've also done it on poster artwork. Is the creative process different between the two, or I guess is there one you prefer more, or is it all kind of just straight and narrow? I'm going to draw stuff that's going to be put on things at the very end of the day.
Yeah, I think so with posters and with, physical media, I think, in my opinion, it's very similar.
Hmm.
I mean, just because they're all part of just like, it's like promotional art. You're promoting a movie, you have to get talent likeness approval and go through like oftentimes like the same creative directors and stuff like that.
Hmm.
The one difference is that with physical media, sometimes they have like so like more size limitations to them. So
Yeah.
with Blu-rays or steelbooks, usually I have to like sometimes I've like designed the DVD or like illustrated the DVDs inside them as well, and also the interior cover to them.
Hmm.
And so that's something that is important to kind of like keep in mind, because sometimes you can like do it in a way that's very smart, uh, and yeah, like, I always work off of like a template they gave me
Hmm.
for physical media. But I think other than that, it's more or less the same process for
My
me.
favorite pieces of physical media are when like you open them up and it just seems like one flow of thought is brought into everything. Like it
Yeah.
seems like one big art piece. The one in Rand does that in spades, and I like the black and red just aesthetic over every single part of that John Wick Chapter 4 steelbook as well. So I I would hope that like at some point it's just like, okay, I want to make this thing like all matched together. But I know that there are some steel books to where like one artist works on one piece and another one works on like the inside art or the disc art or something.
Yeah.
So when you
Hmm.
work with a different artist on a piece, do you talk with one another, or is it just kind of like, this is my idea, she's seen my sketch, this is hopefully
Right.
it all works in the end?
Yeah, I so with physical media and with posters, I actually haven't worked with um like another artist on like the same
Okay.
piece. I
Hmm.
think that like yeah, I do think that one of the Blu-ray artwork that I did for Anatomia Extinction. It's a Japanese film by Error 4444, but
Again, yeah, I'll show that while
they
you're talking about it.
yeah, that was actually the first I feel like it's like that was the first Blu-ray art I did for them. But another artist illustrated it was the art cards inside, and I am actually
Hmm.
completely blanking on their name. But I did the whole thing except for the two mini art cards at the bottom left. But I actually didn't know that another artist was going to add them in. I think like the client probably just like commissioned someone else to draw some art cards to go along with the the set.
Hmm.
But yeah, like other than that, I've been on like what often happens is that I'll be on a job and I will know like all the other artists who are working on like, for example, the same job. So when I was doing the artwork for John Wick 4, like I knew all of the other artists who were also making a poster for that.
Hmm.
But we didn't really like communicate or anything. We were kind of just like, oh, hey, like I saw your name on the list. Like that's really cool. Yeah.
Just looking at the piece you did for Anatomica Extinction, I've never heard of this movie, but your artwork makes me want to watch the movie because it looks wild.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, yes, it was I got to see this movie. They sent me a copy of this movie as I was doing artwork for it, and it is really good. It is
Okay.
this like 80s Japanese like horror, like indie horror flick
Hmm.
from the time, and I had also never heard of it, but it's by I'm also blanking on the director's name, but I think he ended up making some like really good oh, I think he is the director for I don't know if you've heard of Tokyo Gore Police.
I
I think
haven't,
that's the
no.
same guy. Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I think he's like a cult name in like Japanese horror, but
Okay.
um but this was like one of his earlier films, and
Mhm.
so I got to watch that, and I was actually really surprised by how much I really liked it.
Yeah. Like I said, it makes me want to watch it. Like just the whole rats surrounding your head scenario, that it would be one of my worst fears. I would not want to be around that at all. But
Yeah, I think if you're a fan of like Cronenberg movies,
oh, sure. Yeah, I
like
can see that.
that's yeah,
Mhm.
then you'll really like this kind of stuff.
That's very cool. So, when is there a difference between like steel books and this type of thing? Like I'm assuming like how many pieces are going to be inside the box when you're creating the art for
Oh,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I think, with steelbooks, there isn't really a difference, at least the way I was working. I think with so with this label in particular, with boutique labels, because they're usually a lot smaller,
Hmm.
I feel like I have maybe like a bit more freedom to kind of like experiment with different things.
Sure.
Um, with but in terms of differences, yeah, I think it was like very much like similar to as when I'm working with steelbooks. I think like with the Best Buy steelbooks I did, I think because it was released through Best Buy, there's sometimes um, like some more, what's it called, like legal stuff like that they don't want you to draw, or that they're kind of like, oh no, like, they don't feel like this would be good for like the marketing for that.
Hmm.
um so but that can be like maybe like a little bit of a limitation, but overall I found like the process for both of them to be like very similar.
Sure. Well, I don't want to be the one breaking the news to you. I'm hoping that you've heard this before, but Best Buy is
Yes,
not going to sell physical media anymore.
I've heard. Yeah,
It's very,
it
very
would.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I was like really upset when I heard the news,
Yeah.
because I felt that they like, I don't know, like I understand the decision, because I think a lot of people are like, well, everything's on streaming now or everything's online. But I'm also just like, like there's so many people out there who do love physical media,
Hmm.
like getting physical like steel books or vinyls or
Right.
stuff like that. And
Hmm.
I don't think the media will ever die, but it is just really sad just being like, oh, okay, well that's completely gone now.
Yeah. I do think that like boutique labels, like I have the podcast named after, are gonna keep on continuing to grow larger and larger, have a bigger presence on people's shelf, because I don't think you're gonna be able to find a lot of this retail. I know Walmart is kind of grabbing all of the Steelbook exclusives that Best Buy had, which is awesome to see. I'm glad it's
Oh
not going
yeah.
away yet. But I am
Mhm.
afraid in like the next 10 years. I know you're a video game person. You said you brought your PS4 to play discs. I think a lot of people do that. And I'm afraid that the next generation of consoles isn't going to have a disc drive at all. And when that
Yeah.
happens, I
Mhm.
think that that's going to take away a lot of the retail business of physical media, because there's going to be less of a base to kind of grasp onto and have people randomly blind buy a movie from the shelf.
Right. Because I know that with like we currently have a PS5, but I know that there's also like a PS5 like a discless version,
Right.
if I'm right. Yeah. And yeah, like when I heard of that, I was like, oh, that's so weird. But like I get the reasoning, but I'm also just like, it's just like seeing like such a like an integral part of this thing just completely go away and become obsolete, and I'm like, it's like really kind of sad. And I've also heard recently that Disney started releasing uh they started releasing like discless steelbooks. So it's like steelbooks
Oh,
with no disc.
that was from another boutique label. They didn't get the rights to have the disc, but they got the rights to make artwork for packaging. So they came out with a discless version of WandaVision.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh
and
my God.
I think it's sold out. I think that there's just a market for people wanting to collect stuff like that. But for me, I don't understand. Like I love the artwork that's on there, but I also
Right.
want to open something up and pop something in, you know?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'm kind of like, because when I heard that, I was like, this is so, it like feels so bizarre because
Hmm.
it's like, well, why don't you just get like a WandaVision poster or like print it as like a poster format or
Right.
something? I'm just like, I don't understand. Like, there's like a, because with Blu-rays and steelbooks, there's like they have a purpose, which is you
Hmm.
open them up and there's like the disc inside, and
Right.
you have your own collection of them. And so when I heard of like the discless versions, and I was kind of like, oh man, we're like reaching the a point in the future where I like don't start to not understand like
Hmm.
what these things are anymore.
Yeah. My thought
um
on it was that there's a big collectible market for steelbooks. So they tried to
right,
go the
yeah.
route of, hey, can we still do this without any type of media inside of it? Do they like the IP enough to where they will just buy this as art as opposed to art and media, I guess. So
Yeah.
to me, it's not for me, but I do like the idea, I guess. Didn't have a digital code or anything in there. It was just like art,
Oh,
which
it was just art.
yeah.
Oh,
Interesting
wow.
choice. And I can't remember what company did it, but they got so much slack that I don't think they're going to do it again, at least for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that also with steelbooks, because there's a lot of steelbooks where you open it up and like the interior art and also the DVDs inside make a
Hmm.
very complete set as well.
Yeah.
And there's like a lot of ways where artists can be very creative given like the limitations for what can go on the disc and the
Hmm.
interior. And so, I right, like I never want to be, I want to be like very open to like new things, and never I'm not the type of person who's like I'm like, oh, like the old ways are so much better. But yeah, sometimes it's like hearing about like self-driving cars, and I'm just
Hmm.
like, oh wow, I don't understand this, but okay,
Sure.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Movie Hunter in the chat. I did forget about this. In like 2005 to 2006, they had empty steel books as like pre-order bonuses to where like, hey, before
Oh,
the movie
okay.
even comes out, if you want to grab it before it comes out, you'll get this steel book included for free. That aspect makes sense. Just not having any movie ever inside of a thing that's supposed to have movies inside of it. That I don't know. To me, that's just like a bridge too far.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know that you also one of your newest physical media pieces that you made you have it's from Shout Studios. It's that T Lang collection. T Lang gosh, do you want to show it off? I can't remember the
Yes.
other artist. I'm sorry.
So
T yeah, here.
it's called the T Long and David Chang collection.
There we go.
And so they sent me a few copies. And so this one, I actually haven't opened it up yet, but it is basically a collection. So these two were, I think, like they were huge, action martial arts film stars back in like the 70s and 80s. And they did a lot of movies together. And so Shout Factory had contacted me to do the cover art for like the box set for it.
Hmm.
And so I just did it, and I thought I wouldn't be able to show it here because they took a while for it to fully release, but they finally sent me these copies. And so yeah, yeah.
Very so on each and every individual sleeve, the cases that are on there, you have different artwork on there as well. When I looked
Oh
on
no, actually it's just
okay.
this.
When
Yeah,
I
the
looked
box.
online, I couldn't find a lot of the artwork on the inside, so that's good to know. But yeah, the
Yeah,
box
I
art
think
definitely pops.
I think what the artwork for each individual, if I'm not correct, I have to like open this up to check, but the artwork on each individual one might just be like the original
Sure, the poster
artwork
art or something.
for
Yeah.
like yeah, like the original posters and
Yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense. Um, I I know we talked about like Lionsgate versus other boutique labels. How between the different boutique labels, is there a different like process as to like how hands on or off they are? I know Shout Studios is like the biggest, if one of the biggest boutique labels out there. They're when you say boutique label, that's like one of the first ones that comes to mind. And then you
Right.
have like your Error
Yeah.
4444s, which are a lot smaller of a company. They come out with like releases that are have like 1,000 copies, so they're running on a limited budget. I'm just kind of curious how the creative process works in between like a larger and a smaller boutique.
Yeah, sure. Like, I think overall it's like pretty similar. But the I do think like working with a label like Shout Factory is it's a bit more streamlined, because they have, their creative directors and
Hmm.
art directors who like give me feedback and, send me, the copies after everything is out. And I think that actually this job, it didn't take me that long. I think it only because it was just like one cover.
Hmm.
Um, so I think it was pretty similar working on that, and also, but with the smaller boutique labels, because I've done stuff for, so it was Spectrum Films in France. I've also done, a few like Error 4444 stuff. So
Hmm.
like this one is for, it's like a box set for
Oh, here,
Funky Forest and Warp
here.
Forest.
There we go.
And this one I actually did do like the cover art for
Nice.
the discs inside, or
Hmm.
not the discs, the cases inside and stuff. But um, with the smaller ones, I feel like it is a bit because with Error, so the story behind that is that the person Logan who contacted me to do artwork for it, he is one of the people who started up this label, but
Hmm.
he knew me because we went to the same college
Oh
and
wow.
we weren't in the same year, but I think he
Hmm.
heard my name from like someone at our school, and that
Man,
was how he reached out to me.
that's a small world,
Um,
huh?
right, and so it
Yeah.
was kind of like, he knew me and my art, and with that one, I felt like it was really open because I was
Hmm.
kind of like, yeah, like I'll try designing the booklet inside and the interior art and the discs and stuff, but it was all kind of like stuff that I was willing to do and experiment with. And he
Yeah.
was kind of like, yeah, like, we're just starting up this label. Like a few years ago when I started working with them, they were like,
Hmm.
yeah, we're just starting this out, so we're also trying to figure it out. And so it was kind of just you know like a lot of back and forth and like finding our footing with that kind of stuff. Whereas something, right, like with Shout Factory, it was more kind of like a streamlined process. Like
Hmm.
they knew exactly what they were looking for, and they were like, yeah, like we just need this box art cover, and like, here's some feedback from the ads. And it wasn't there. It like because they were like more of an established like boutique label, so it was just like a more quicker process.
That is kind of cool. For Error, did you come out with the first box set that they made? I'm very unfamiliar with
Yeah,
the
I think the
label.
first one was Anatomia.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
And
cool. It's also cool that like you kind of navigated the waters with them because they're trying to figure everything out, coming out with their first release, and you're like, yeah, I'll make artwork, and yeah, we'll see what happens. That's a very very cool story, especially the small world part going to the same college.
right,
Hmm.
yeah. It was also like around that time I just like really wanted to do a lot more artwork for
Yeah.
physical media. And so I was kind of like, okay, yeah, like I will be happy to do this, and then I'll just have more stuff for my portfolio, and it kind of just,
Hmm.
for future clients. And yeah.
Are there any movies that you would love to do like a physical media release of?
Ooh. Yeah, there are a few movies. Okay, I think so. I've wanted to work with Criterion. Like everyone wants to work with
Uh huh.
Criterion, but
Right.
I was kind of like, I've been sending my artwork to them for like years and years, and I'm kind of
Mm.
like, I know that what I will manifest this like
Hmm.
some way one day. They have the license to. Are you a fan of old French movies?
I have not seen a lot of them, but the ones that I have seen, I do enjoy.
Okay, because I really like uh, Melville,
Okay, I've
like
heard
the
of it. I haven't
French.
seen it. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, he did a lot of like new wave like crime cinema back in like the 60s. And like my
Yeah.
favorite one is The Samurai, or like in French it's Le Samurai.
Okay.
And that's like one of my favorite movies in that decade. And I really I love the whole aesthetic. I love like the main actor, Alain Delon. I would, it would be a dream to like do something for that one day,
Hmm.
because I know Criterion has like their cover for that. But I'd love to do something like illustrated for it.
Sure. Did that come out on Blu-ray already, and it still needs a 4K treatment to it, or
That's a good question. I'm actually not sure.
because I know that there have been a couple occasions with Criterion to where, like, when they're upgrading formats, they make like another release for it that has different artwork. Sometimes they use the same artwork. Sometimes they've done
Right.
different artwork. Yeah.
Yeah. The current art they have for it is, I think, like it's a still of the character from the movie.
Hmm.
But yeah, like I don't know like what's the, like if they're ever planning to do something more with that, but I that's like definitely one of the movies.
Right.
Um and what else? I mean, I think I'd like to do more. Yeah, I think, with them in particular, I would love to do like classic films with
Hmm.
Criterion as well. I don't really have a preference for which. I think because with physical media and with posters, like most of the stuff, like I love classic movies, but most of the stuff I do with clients are like modern films. And so I actually rarely get to draw art for classic movies anymore, which
Hmm.
is kind of sad. So, any job that involves that would be really nice.
Right. I mean, you wanted to work with Criterion for so long. Hopefully, I'm assuming it's just like putting in like an application almost, like just putting in different pieces that you've done, sending it to them, and just saying, "Hey, I would love to work with you in the future." Is that more or less kind of how
Yeah,
that
I
works?
that's like pretty much how I've done it with like pretty much everyone
Hmm.
else. I yeah, like I've kind of like every time I do have like a release with someone, I
Hmm.
usually just like pop in another email to Criterion. I'm like, "Hey, it's me again." Like,
Right.
here's some of my recent work. And but like I feel like I'm, kind of a very stubborn person that way. I don't I choose to just like keep going at something until like I have it. And
Hmm.
so I'm like, well, this has worked for me for everything else. And so hopefully this will do
Have
the
you heard of the
same.
boutique label Indicator? They're
No,
they're
I don't think so.
they're vaguely new. They've been around for I think about a year now. If you like the
Mhm.
French cinema stuff, I would try
Ooh.
to get in contact with them because they come out with great looking releases. And it's in
Oh,
like
okay.
that vein. It's a lot of foreign films that they've come out with so far. Indicator?
Awesome. Yeah, I will. I am going to search them up right now.
Yeah.
Indicator.
Indicator and Radiance. I think Radiance would be like right up your alley too. Radiance is kind of made up with a couple of people who used to run Arrow Video.
Oh,
They
yeah.
started
Mhm.
another label, and yeah, it's uh, the subgenres that you really like. Both of those really like, so yeah, it wouldn't be a bad thing to just throw your hat in the ring to those places as well.
Oh, yes. Actually, yeah, I just searched up Radiance, and I've definitely seen a lot of their covers before. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they look great. I think there's one other piece boutique wise that we haven't talked about. Let's see if I can pull that up. But I want to say it is in the heat of the sun.
Yeah, that was one. Oh, I wish I had a physical copy of it. So I did this one a few years ago.
Hmm.
And I did this one for Spectrum Films, which is a boutique label. They're in France. And so they were also like very I feel like very easy to work with. I don't know if it's like maybe a language barrier thing, but
Hmm.
because usually I send my clients like sketches and stuff so they can approve it, but they were actually like they were kind of like, okay, whatever. I sent them a bunch of sketches. They were like, oh, you can just pick the one that you like the best for this.
Mm.
We'll go with this. And I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, like this one was really fun to work on. It's for a Chinese film, In the Heat of the Sun. And I'm also completely blanking on the director's name, but he is like a very acclaimed
Jiang Wen, I
director.
think. I think is what
Yes,
it says right
Zhang
there.
Wen.
Yeah.
Yes, he's a very acclaimed director in China. And I also like saw the movie while working on it, and it rocks. It's really great. And
Hmm.
it's also I told my family because we're all like so I actually immigrated from China, but I was like very young when I moved here.
Hmm.
I told my parents I was like doing a cover for this, and they were like, "Oh my God, like that's like such a big movie
Oh, that's
in China."
cool.
They were just like, "Yeah, like this was like it's like a such a big like nostalgic childhood film for them
Hmm.
because it's about these a group of kids who grow up during the Cultural Revolution,
Hmm.
and I watched it and I was like, oh my God, it's really beautiful. Like the music and like performances and everything. It's really good. And I think anyone who like you don't have to know a lot about Chinese history or like feel like you can relate to the characters to watch it. It's like a very universal movie.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's got to be a cool feeling to not even be aware of a movie, but you find out your parents love it, and you end
Yeah.
up falling in love with that same movie too, and doing artwork for it as well. Yeah, that'd
Oh,
be cool.
totally.
If it were for me, if I were to like interview anybody from Smokey and the Bandit or Over the Top, my dad would just like his head would explode, like one of those deals. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
type. I feel like your parents have a lot more sophisticated taste than like my side of the family, but that's got to be like
Right.
the best feeling.
Yeah, well, because my parents, they moved here. So, because I moved to the US with them when I was 5.
Hmm.
And so they just really, like, I'm sure they know like lot more like Chinese pop culture and stuff like that. But, they never like fell in with any US pop culture stuff. It was just like not really a thing
Sure.
growing up.
Hmm.
And so I had like, never seen any of like the big movies like Jaws or Titanic or anything until I was in college or until I like assigned those for myself.
Hmm.
But and so also with my parents, like I can tell them like, oh hey, I'm doing artwork for this movie, and if it's like an American movie, they just like won't really know anything about it.
Sure.
But when I told them about like this Chinese film, and they were like, oh my God, that's like such a huge movie there, and they were like, oh, I love this movie, and then you can just like I just like saw their eyes light up and they were like, "Oh, that's so cool." And cuz like they realize that it's actually like really cool to be able to do this as an artist. And yeah, I
Right.
think it's like a very nice feeling, especially cuz I'm sure all parents, when their kids tell them they're going into art or like film or something like that, they're kind of like, "Oh God." So to be able to get like a positive reaction like that was
Hmm.
really cool.
Yeah, to get any type of work of something that they like, and it seems like it'd be rare to do in the States, and you ended up like finding your way into a different uh different country just to grab that, bring that to them. That's yeah. But that's got to be it's always nice to impress your parents, right?
Yeah, yeah.
um well, I don't know if I have much else for you. Are there any closing comments that you'd like to say? I know that there were a couple movies you say you'd like to work on. Are there any things you'd like to tease that you're working on now?
Oh, what am I working on now? I'm working on a bunch of projects. No, oh, oh my gosh, I am. There's a potential I might be working on a either like a new Blu-ray or Japanese steelbook for a Japanese film
Hmm.
that I'm like I really hope I get it, but I actually don't know because we have to wait for like the client to get back. So I don't know how that's going, but yeah, like I'm working on a bunch of projects that involve like I have to see they involve like a lot of like what's it called like approvals
Hmm.
from the like the studios or companies. So I'm waiting to hear back on that. But yeah, I think like that's pretty much it for me. Like if people want to find like people who's listening, they want to find me on social media. I am my Instagram or like Twitter. It's at ZIQQIX. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, no, and I've when I found out I was going to interview you, I did a deep dive on your website, and you have a lot of
Oh,
great pieces.
yay.
On the intro video, I showed a few of my favorite ones on there. My favorite movie is The
Awesome.
Thing, and the poster you did for that, oh my gosh, looks amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's also like I love movies from the 80s and like 80s horror movies, and so yeah, it's like always number like the top thing on my website. I'm like, "Oh, I never wanna like move it down or replace it with anything
Right.
else." So, yeah.
No, yeah, it looks amazing. At the end of every podcast, I like to kind of give a sneak peek on what the next podcast is going to be about. Um,
Mhm.
this next one, a movie from the '80s. It's one that I haven't seen, and I've heard nothing but good things about it, but I really don't know much about it. I'll be talking with Huck's Pop Culture Cafe, and we'll be talking about Witness by Arrow Video. It's one of those movies that like I never really had the opportunity to watch. It was a little bit before my time, so there was a new release of this that came out just a couple months ago, and I am excited to dig into it because, like I said, I know that he kind of invades the Amish community, but other than that, I really don't know too much about it. But I love Harrison Ford.
Yeah, I began watching this movie a while ago, and I actually never finished, but I really do wanna finish it because everyone's like, "Wait, you haven't seen Witness?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't. I need to finish this." But yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, it should be a good time. I know tonight I had a blast. I love picking anybody's brain that's in the industry, and I love promoting the people who do the art on releases that I absolutely love because I don't think that is like called out enough. So thank you once again for coming on here.
Yay. Yeah, no, thank you so much, Jake. I had such a lot of fun, and when this comes out, I will be sure. I have like a little section on my website for like podcast appearances because I love
Mhm.
going on podcasts. So I'll be sure to put this on there. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, very much appreciated. Thank you very much. Well, everybody, this has been episode number 12 of Boutique Talk. And until next time, I'll see you.